Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. Here with me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, one aspect of all of this talk about arms for Ukraine and Trump and everything else, one aspect of it that's overlooked is that Europe seems to be gearing up for a war. And that's and then you wonder whenever we ask, well, what this makes no sense. What their policy of keep sending in arms to Ukraine just in order to keep the war going, it doesn't seem to make any sense, in its own terms. What is the point of that? Unless the goal is to provoke a war, and there are clearly forces within Europe that seem to want the war. I mean, we obviously know, about the Baltic states, but now we have a German chancellor who seems very keen on provoking a war with Russia. This is a German chancellor who is very unlike any post-1945 German chancellor in his belligerence. He said the other day that the diplomacy has now been exhausted. There's no point in any further diplomacy.
Well, I didn't know it started. Did I miss something?
Yes, exactly.
Well, knock me down with a feather. Okay.
Indeed, what diplomacy in the 3.5 years? I'm trying to figure out whether at any time were there any negotiations. I don't remember. I mean, there were occasional phone calls, and even that, not too many. But I didn't see any diplomacy.
Maybe we need to check did the word diplomacy did it mean its meaning change over the last 3.5 years? I'm not aware.
I'm
Okay.
not aware. So,
Well, see, but see, that's just the whole point. There is no self-awareness among these people. I think George is right that, um, do they want a war? Well, that's questionable. Are they preparing for it? Certainly. Okay, at least on many, rhetorically, of course they are. They seem to be willing to blow up their own
right,
financial system and redo it, basically all in debt.
right.
Okay. Um, is there a recognition that the EU project is failing and they need a new operating principle to unite it? And most importantly, they always going to look for a way. They're not as good as the Israelis, but they're thinking like the Israelis that they'll have to pull the Americans in.
Well,
Okay, that's
that's
it.
the only logic of it,
That's
because
the only logic of it.
because by themselves they're not going to be able to fight against Russia. So the goal here is to provoke some kind of a war. And when you listen to Merz, and there's no other way to interpret anything that he says except that he seems to want this war. I mean, of course, we know about the Baltic states and the lunacy and then you have to wonder whether we've gone back to a kind of earlier project of Europe uniting to slice Russia up. I was kind of, reading about, during the 1920s and 1930s, even before, the rise of Hitler. I mean, the Soviet leaders kind of knew that they're coming for us. I mean, it's just a matter of time. There was the Allied intervention. That didn't work because there was popular uproar at home, and eventually they had to abandon the Allied intervention. But the goal of the Allied intervention was much more than just toppling the communists. It was to slice up Russia for themselves.
When did Stalin give the speech? We have 10 years. What was it? That was in
Um,
1930?
I think maybe a little earlier. Yeah, I think about late
We have 10
20th.
years to prepare ourselves or we'll be destroyed. I'm paraphrasing.
Right.
Yes. What I'm just confirming that was very much part of their thinking.
Yeah,
Okay. You have to remember the Soviet Union was a pariah.
it was.
Okay. Yeah, and a lot of people forget, you didn't use the word then, but it was a sanctioned country
Yeah,
during that time.
yeah, that's right. So because if it's not the British, if it's not the French, then it's the Japanese. If it's not the British, the French, and the Japanese, then it's the Germans. And so this was what was fear, and of course there was no question there were plans to 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 take Russia. They saw Russia was very weak. They saw Russia was very weak under the Bolsheviks. I mean, they fought this terrible civil war, and it was a very very shaky system.
Well,
So their
they invoked,
neighbors were kind of salivating at the prospect of, hey, we can take slices of this.
you know, because it was ideologically driven, collectivization was a really
It was
disastrous policy.
disaster.
And
Exactly.
then the forced industrialization, which eventually created uh, a peer
Right.
superpower in
Right.
industrial capacity, but at the unbelievable cost.
Yeah.
Okay,
Exactly.
and during that process, as George was saying, it was amazingly weak because instead of fighting people potentially destroying your country, you're killing your own countrymen.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. 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 So that's why. So in a way, we've kind of gone back to that time, which is that you have many countries driven by an extraordinary hostility toward Russia, and driven by greed. They look at this rich land, rich in natural resources, rich in agriculture, and they want a slice of it. And so therefore this when you look around and you have NATO talking in this way about war, and then you think, of course, the way they present it, we're defensive. We're worried about Russia. We're worried about Russia. They know perfectly well that Russia's not going to attack anyone. There's no threat from Russia. So essentially, they are projecting. And more and more, as you look at the papers, you see, that how the extent of this projection. So here, for instance, is this is an article from the Financial Times. Says Europe's biggest port, that's Rotterdam, readies for potential war with Russia. And then says Europe's largest port is gearing up for a potential conflict with Russia by reserving space for ships carrying military supplies, where to divert cargo if war breaks out. So they're already reserving space for war cargo.
Okay, where's this war cargo going to come from?
Well, I'm assuming it's going to come from the United States. I mean,
Oh, okay. All right. Oh, so it's going to be a long war.
it's
Okay.
it's exactly. I mean, it's Rotterdam. That's
But
why
is it going to be for the British Expeditionary Force? Oh, no, they can't even fill the stadium
no,
right now.
exactly, exactly. But they got Rotterdam's measures are part of a wave of war preparations across the continent. The EU is drawing up a rearmament plan of up to 800 billion euros as it tries to become more self-sufficient in defense in response to demands from President Donald Trump, and to deter Russian aggression as Vladimir Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine grinds into its fourth year.
I've always found it very curious, that as Vladimir Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine grinds into its fourth year, is that a hat tip to Russia's military prowess? I mean, fighting Ukraine.
That's right,
Yeah.
exactly. So you're
I mean,
fighting you.
what I'm saying is that, either, it's either Keystone Cops or
Yeah.
it's 007.
It may exactly
But
yeah, that's right. It never makes any sense because it's grinding for fourth year. So and then they're going to go and attack Germany. I mean,
yeah, so they're going to have a victory parade in Paris when?
no, it never made any sense. But it's a way of just getting the public frightened. The Netherlands, along with its NATO allies, has pledged to boost defense spending to 5% of GDP. In May, the Dutch Defense Ministry announced that Rotterdam would have to provide space for handling multiple ships carrying military cargo at the request of NATO. And says the port has handled armaments before, with a surge during the Gulf War from 2003. But even at the height of the Cold War, it did not have a dedicated key. So they're going to have, basically already, you've got this part of the port is reserved for NATO cargo.
And everybody, the Rotterdam key, which is really, really important, apparently. That's what the Dutch will say. That's our 5%.
Yes,
Okay?
yeah, that's a
We created the
5%.
port. We're paid up.
Yeah,
We're paid. They're all going to do this. They're all going to do this.
They're
Okay?
absolutely right. That's going to be
And then we got a new Autobahn. Up.
That's it.
That's for
Exactly.
NATO. We're
That's
going
it.
to. It's the NATO Autobahn. See,
That's it.
we paid up, everyone.
That's right.
See how they're. Oh,
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Hey, yes. Um, and then here is this army newspaper from the UK. What a state-on-state conflict between NATO and Russia could look like. Britain's latest strategic defense review highlighted the need to prepare for state-on-state conflict. The most likely scenario is a multi-front Russian assault on the Baltic states using Belarus as a staging ground. Again, one doesn't, they're not telling us why would there be an assault on the Baltic states, but be that as it may.
well, I mean, also, the Baltic states are kind of small, I think.
Right.
Okay.
But it's important real estate,
Yeah,
because
it's important real estate, but I mean, do you need to put troops on the ground? I
I
mean,
don't think so.
an afternoon of bombing essential
Right.
infrastructure and you're out of the war.
No, you only need to seize the ports. I mean that's the
Yeah,
key. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Um,
Or destroy them.
yeah, or destroy them. Yeah, that's right. Um, and then one key concern is the Suwalki Gap, the 40-mile.
I've been to Suwałki. It's a great place. Okay.
The 40-mile corridor between Poland and Lithuania that links Belarus to Russia's Kaliningrad exclave. No, that links Russia to the Kaliningrad exclave. I mean, that's the key. If severed, it would isolate the Baltics from the rest of NATO.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair and respectful to the people of the Baltics, I mean, if the West is going to go to war with Russia, what is the relative weight value of the Baltic republics? I
No,
mean,
no, 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 no.
it's even negligible.
It,
I mean, okay, I said it in a different way, a full scale war start, and the Baltic republics fall. Does that mean Russia won? I mean,
right. No, I think,
does it mean NATO lost?
right. But look, I mean, the reason why Russia would, of course, take the Baltic states is in anticipation of a possible NATO invasion. I mean, you don't want to facilitate a NATO invasion, so you grab all the ports from where NATO would mount an onslaught. So it would essentially be a defensive maneuver.
But I thought that was maniacal communism.
Exactly.
See what I mean? I don't want to do this divert too much here, but Stalin. There's a gazillion things you can say about Stalin, but Stalin understood the defense of the Soviet Union. Okay.
Right. That's right. That's right. And that's why in the secret protocols of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact were the Baltic states, in anticipation of a coming attack, in a coming German attack. And so essentially,
and it did. And it did.
It did, exactly. And then in the lead up to any invasion, Russia could use cyber attacks to disrupt communications, banking systems, and energy infrastructure. So that's what I mean. It's like all of this is under projection. Okay, so that means this is what NATO is planning. You say, okay, cyber attacks to disrupt communications, banking systems, and energy infrastructure. Yeah, I'm sure that that's part of the planning. NATO's current forward presence in the region, a 5,000 strong tripwire force, might struggle to hold the line, although that assessment was made before Russia's losses in Ukraine. If Article 5 were triggered, the first NATO unit likely to deploy would be the Allied reaction force. It consists of around 10,000 troops, but can be scaled up to 300,000. Oh, it can be. Oh, good.
Oh, this is like a computer simulation. Keep
That's right.
going.
Suddenly, out of nowhere, they get
Yeah, that's
290,000
right.
troops. Kaliningrad, already home to Russia's Iskander missile systems, could serve as a launch point for missile strikes and further escalation. And analysts say NATO would have an advantage in a conventional conflict with more tanks, aircraft, and personnel.
Well, analysts say NATO would have an advantage in a conventional conflict with more tanks, aircraft, and personnel. If such a war were to occur, more tanks, more aircraft, and personnel really won't count for much.
I don't think so, and I don't even because if they're going to take the Baltic states, then that's already gone. What's the plan after that? What is the NATO plan? So they're going to invade Russia with their tanks and whatever. That doesn't
Yeah.
sound like much of a strategy.
It consists of around 10,000 troops, but could be scaled up to 300,000. Well, maybe the Russians would impede that.
Also, 300,000 isn't much. I mean, just thinking in terms of how many troops are deployed in Ukraine on either side, it's a hell of a lot more than 300,000. So I don't know what difference 300,000 is going to make. Um, and but losses could be high, and there is a risk of nuclear escalation.
Oh, suddenly they come up with that.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
and by the way, okay.
that's right. If Moscow believes the regime was under threat, no. If Moscow believes that NATO has aggressive intent and invades Russia, then that brings
That's a given.
yeah.
It's a
But also,
given.
regime under threat. What a complete nonsense! When you invade, it strengthens a regime. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's only in peacetime that regimes can be, if there's détente, then a regime can be under threat. But there's war, then everyone rallies around the regime, which is, of course, what happened in the Soviet Union. No one liked the Bolshevik regime, but the people rallied around it in the face of the German invasion. Any large-scale fighting in the Baltics would also likely lead to mass civilian displacement and strain neighboring countries' economies and infrastructure. Well, like,
Yeah, I got some bad news, going out in the morning for hot bagels and sweets and
I
having
think
that cappuccino,
that's
the
gone.
Western populations are never going to get on board for this, George.
I don't. You're
These
absolutely right.
elites
Yeah,
just talking to themselves. So
yeah.
this paper, who commissioned it? Was it the Atlantic Council?
No, I think it's the British Army.
Okay, so but somebody made a nice quick change on this. I mean, this is just juvenile stuff. This is
Right, right,
ridiculous.
right, right. These things acquire a certain reality of their own
Yes, they
with
do.
governments,
Yes, they do.
governments kind of whipping up this hysteria about this imminent threat of war with Russia. So here is Spiegel, Der Spiegel. Again, this is what from a day ago. Germany's rising concerns about Russia. Politicians and military leaders have warned that Russia could be ready for a full-scale war against NATO by 2029. So that's only 4 years. So, we could all still be here. We could still be doing the gaggle, and already we're got a full-scale war on our hands. At the very end, after the summit meeting of NATO member states in The Hague had already concluded, and Friedrich Merz was speaking to a group of journalists, the Chancellor didn't mince words. What does war actually mean? Merz asked last Wednesday before then answering his own question. Germany, said, has already been the target of numerous attacks.
Oh yeah, like its pipeline.
Yes, exactly. Merz went down the list. Destroyed underwater cable in the Baltic Sea, Underwater cable. So it doesn't say, yeah, not the Nord Stream pipeline. This is the underwater cable. German military bases spied on by drones. AI generated fake news. It's an interesting
Wow.
selection of attacks on Germany. AI generated fake news. Um, I would think pretty much anybody can generate fake news via AI. I mean that's what AI is. You can just do whatever you want with it. Merz concluded by saying that the transition from peace to war is fluid. In that sense, he continued, we are already under attack by Russia.
But interestingly enough, Russia is not under the attack from NATO.
No, not at all, because NATO is defensive. So we are already under attack by Russia. See, this is what I mean. That when people talk like this, you know, you have to sort of listen. This is they are preparing for war. We are already under attack by Russia, and the best he can do is talk about this destroyed underwater cable. And we've already done so many podcasts on this about why underwater cables get damaged.
Well,
Um,
and we've done enough of those. The underwater cables is that if there was a definitive proof, we would have heard about it by now.
exactly,
But we've
exactly.
never gotten.
That's right.
We have the proof. We've got the receipt. Nobody has ever done
No,
that.
nobody's done that. Exactly. They
Is
just simply say it was. Yeah,
irrespective of the vitriol.
yeah. That's right. Exactly. That's why I say, oh, it's believed to be by Russia, believed to be, but never any evidence. And then he goes, even if no Russian tanks are rolling across the border into Germany, according to Merz's view of things, the country is already in a kind of state of war.
I think the Russians would agree with, the Operation Spiderweb. Okay. Who was behind that? Okay. So Russia is already at war with NATO. The Russians didn't go in and destroy strategic bombers outside of Paris.
No,
Okay.
no, no, no. That's right. Um, and so, and then Merz and his most important ministers had hardly been sworn into office before they met in May with representatives of the Bundesnachrichtendienst, which is the
It
German
sounds
version of
like
the CIA.
that's like a swear word.
Bundesnachrichtendienst, the BND, German Foreign Intelligence Agency.
Thank God the Germans didn't win the Second World War.
The BND briefed the group on its top secret analysis, focusing on the question as to how quickly a serious confrontation with Russia might develop. You know, it's funny that Spiegel just reports all this without the slightest critical acumen or anything, calling any of this into question. It's a transformation, because I remember that Der Spiegel back in the 70s used to be very much a détente minded magazine. He was very much pursue the Brandtian Ostpolitik, that always against any kind of war with the Soviet Union, have to be make nice with the DDR. This belligerence, this amazing transformation.
What's interesting too, dovetailing from that, is that maybe to help avoid this scenario, maybe going back to arms agreements,
Right.
maybe give this. Don't give war. War is not inevitable.
Right.
There are things we can do
That's
to
right.
avoid this,
That's right.
like
But you're
maybe
right.
talk,
Yeah.
like talking to the Russians.
That's right. Exactly. No, it's all done with the tone that, well, there's nothing we can do. We're inevitably, inexorably going down this path. Thus far, the BND briefed the group on its top secret and focusing on the group how quickly a serious confrontation with Russia might develop. Thus far, the year 2029 has been seen as the possible turning point. I mean, how do they just pluck this number out of there? 2029. Okay. As the moment when Vladimir Putin's military will have recovered from its losses in the war against Ukraine and would be ready for a major attack on NATO territory. That
So,
was
so okay, let me get this straight here. So, after 7 years of war, if we use 2029, um, Russia's appetite has only been whetting.
that's right. Yes,
Okay,
that
I got
we
it.
want to do it. Yes,
I got it. I got it.
yeah,
Okay.
and would be ready for a major attack on NATO territory. And that was the conclusion reached by BND experts after analyzing Russian arms industry data.
Well, George, since the Baltic states are in being highlighted here, I'm not absolutely convinced the rest of NATO is going to say, well, do we really need to go to war with them? I mean, look what they did in Ukraine. Do we want to
Right.
go down this path? I'm not, see, Article 5 is an interesting thing because it's always viewed as a tripwire. This happens and this is going to happen. I'm not convinced it's going to work that way if we ever get there. Okay.
No, I think it's a very good point. The the plan here is, to the extent that we can figure out a plan, is to get the Americans to do the fighting. I mean, they're basically, they don't intend to do any of the fighting themselves. It's to get the Americans involved.
Well, George, year 2029, who's going to be president?
Well, that's a very good question. But the thing was that, given the way Trump has shown himself to be very pliant to these
Yeah, recently. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
recently to these demands, then you think, well, whoever's going to be there is likely just to be, very pliant as well, and that's what they're counting on. They're going to be able to persuade the American president to wage this war. And they say, why do they want to wage this war? I think they are driven by this Russophobia. This is a real powerful Russophobia.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that, yes, there, and I think one day, you and I need to do a deep dive on various forms of Russophobia in Europe because it's spun differently in different places. But I still think it's more of a cover for the crisis of the EU.
but yeah,
Okay.
I
And
agree.
I think it's also the crisis of the West. It's really pathetic that the West can only find redemption and power through military force, and
Right,
not they've given up on the force of their ideas.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think it's that is the case. Um, but what's interesting is that you can always define yourself in opposition to the other. We are this, we have values, they are terrible, inhuman, they don't have values. But obviously that isn't working. I mean, that's why it's becoming more and more belligerent, because then they're not talking about values anymore. I mean, it's that's gone.
Well,
Just
that's a relief.
yeah, I agree. But used to be okay. Well, we're so good. We're just good. We're goodness. We embody goodness, and that was good because whereas the Russians, they're monsters and Slavic and
They're in
so
the
on.
jungle.
The
Yeah.
jungle, exactly. But that isn't working. Which is why suddenly they become much more belligerent, and now there has to be a reckoning. And I mean, it's more and more a kind of talk that that there has to be some kind of an armed reckoning, because otherwise
Yeah,
they're
but
going to just
George,
get their own way.
maybe it's a little bit of a stretch, but I mean, this it sounds like preparation for the Crusades
Yeah,
going into the Holy Land.
yeah, all right,
Yeah.
yeah,
Bad
um,
habits, they
yes,
can't unlearn them.
right.
Even though, even though ideologies change,
Right.
this kind of Western messianic um, um, vibe
Right.
just never goes away, does it?
No, no, no. No, so well, and it goes together. You've got the messianic vibe, and then you've got this greed, this material greed, when they look at this vast, resource-rich landmass, and they're figuring how we can get our hands on this.
Well, why do they have our resources?
Exactly, they're our resources. It's a happy marriage of values, crusade on behalf of our values, and a looting. I mean, they did that. They went in for a lot of looting in the 90s, and that came to an end. They want to go back to the looting era, um, and um, and so here we have recently, however, concerns have arisen that the warnings centered around 2029 could produce the opposite of what was intended. Huh. The year suggests that we can relax in peace for the next 4 years, says a high-ranking NATO general.
Look at this guy. What is his IQ? Anyway, keep.
high, high-ranking. He is concerned that Europe's armies will take their time in arming themselves. They're going to take their sweet time. The BND analysts are also unhappy that 2029 has become the focal point of the military policy debate. No, we need to do this now, like yesterday. We can't wait till 2029. And said a large attack by the Russian military may only be possible in a few years from now, and it is impossible to say what might move Putin to launch such an attack or how likely it is. But the BND is convinced that Russia is already targeting Germany in a variety of ways, some subtle and some less so, and that the Kremlin has updated its war scenarios. So we now have this scenario. This essentially Germany is embracing this hysteria that Russia has aggressive intent against Germany. That's very dangerous talk when if Germans start getting worked up into this fervor that Russia is about to attack them. Because what do you do if you think somebody is about to attack? Well, you attack first.
First. Well, and also, isn't this is a convenient way to outlaw political parties
Exactly.
and
Absolutely.
dissent and
Exactly.
dissent?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Exactly. I mean, the other day we had in this that same Bundestag debate in which Merz um, announced that diplomacy is over. He was attacked by Alice Weidel, the leader of the Alternative for Deutschland party, and he was smirking during her criticisms, smirking because hey, we might just outlaw you
Yeah, there's
altogether.
going to be
You're not going to
there's
be
going to be
here
some
anymore.
there's going to be some empty seats in this chamber.
Exactly. We're not going to have to listen to you anymore here.
You
Um,
know, one of the things that, it never surprises me, but it also shocks, is that, this George found this article. Russian analysts easily can find it as well. And so you get into this kind of look, it's like two mirrors reflecting into each other.
right,
What is real, and because the Russians are not idly going to sit
right,
by and watch them do this. Yeah, preemptive strike.
right.
And then see, they're a great, see how it is.
Yes,
It's
yes,
a self-reinforcing
yes,
argument.
yes. That's right. So this is the BND is talking like this, and Merz is talking like this. Um, and that's what I mean. That we haven't heard anything like this from Germany since the 1930s. I mean, this is really harkening back to that. Not one post 1945 chancellor dared to talk like this. Not
Look, everyone.
Adenauer, Erhard. Even
George,
before Willy Brandt.
George is absolutely right. I mean, if you look at the state-sponsored media
Right,
under Goebbels and people like that, this is exactly what they
right,
were saying every single day.
right. That's right. The threat from the east. That's exactly what it was. The threat from the east, and that it's a preemptive. Whatever we do, it's a preemptive war that we're waging because we don't do it, they're going to attack us. The analysts speak of small pinpricks aimed at testing the willingness of NATO to defend itself and testing the unity of the alliance that US President Donald Trump has repeatedly called into question. The military provocations have recently increased in number. They have been far below the level that might be considered an attack, but they have been suitable to see just how determined the North Atlantic Alliance really is.
Yeah, but isn't NATO countries doing that exactly to Russia?
Well, it's very, but you
You
see,
know, the Crocus City Hall attack. Is there an equivalent that Russia's done in the West?
right,
No.
right, yeah,
Has the daughter of a prominent political philosopher been assassinated in the West during all this? No.
right. That's right. That's exactly
You know,
right.
I mean, there have been acts that would you could can easily conceive as being sabotage in Russia.
Right,
Okay.
right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Sabotage, assassinations. I mean, there was a number of them, not just Daria Dugina. There have been a number of assassinations, um, but nothing comparable. I mean, they're still going on about some warehouse fire, and Russians were responsible for a warehouse fire. Quite why?
I want to know what happened to Stammer's car and his former residence,
Exactly.
and those mo teenage
Those,
models.
yeah, exactly. Those models, those Ukrainian models. um, but what you see here, they're saying all these. What they're trying to do is they're testing the alliance. So so because you don't have any evidence that anything is being done, there's any kind of attack. Because they it's so subtle. It's this they're pinpricks, just to see how NATO would respond. And it says, in May, for example, the Estonia military wanted to inspect the Jaguar in the Baltic Sea, a tanker belonging to the Russian Shadow Fleet. Again, we use this ridiculous nonsense, which had been delivering Russian oil around the world despite Western sanctions.
Which
Yes,
are illegal under international law.
exactly, because what the hell does Russia care about Western sanctions? I mean, so despite Western sanctions, yeah, they're Western sanctions, and Russia doesn't care. It doesn't apply to them. Um, and when the Estonian helicopter approached the vessel, a Russian fighter jet thundered over the ship. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
duh,
yeah,
yeah, that's what they did. No, they weren't going to allow the Estonians to disembark on a Russian ship.
yeah. So when the Estonian helicopter approached, I'm sure the captain said, Just wait a sec, okay? Watch, okay?
That's right.
We got a
Um,
surprise for you." Okay.
that's it. It was a demonstration of power and a successful attempt at intimidation.
Bravo, good job, well done.
Exactly. The Estonian military escorted the tanker until it entered Russian waters, but an inspection never took place. What
I
would
wonder why. Maybe that jet scared them a little bit.
That's
Yeah.
right, but why? What right do you have to inspect anything? I mean, the whole idea, oh, we're inspecting whether they've got insurance. You lock them out of the Western insurance market. So they have insurance, but it's Russian insurance. Oh, let's so they don't have Western insurance, so somehow there's something wrong with it. It was the sanctions. It was the sanctions regime that locked them out of the insurance market.
Oh, I love the next paragraph. Keep going.
Estonia did lodge a protest and accuse Russia of violating its airspace, but nothing at all was heard from NATO, as if the alliance simply wanted to sweep the matter under the rug.
I wonder why. Okay. You biting off more than you can chew, huh?
I think so. Certainly they weren't very enthusiastic to start shooting at Russian jets. Um, and then Secret Service agents and military leaders are concerned that any leniency shown to Russia may have consequences. It could encourage Putin to test Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. And then it says, this is the BND head, outgoing BND head, Bruno Karl said, in Moscow, there are people who no longer believe that NATO's Article 5 is valid.
Well, in Moscow, there are people who believe that people within NATO do not believe that Article 5 is valid. Okay. You can throw it right back.
Well, you
Okay.
can, but there's also the other aspect of it, which is that, well, Russia hasn't once done anything outside of Ukrainian territory. It hasn't at any time fired or attacked any territory of NATO. So they're talking about how Russia doesn't believe that NATO's Article 5 is valid, even though they know perfectly well for 3.5 years, Russia has absolutely restricted all military operations to outside of NATO territory.
Well, you could make the argument the Russians have thought more about Article 5 than NATO has over
Right,
the last 3.5 years.
right, right. In the escalation scenarios under consideration by Karl and his team, battle tanks advancing from the east no longer play a leading role. Battle tanks advancing from the east. I love this battle tanks, Zhukov's tanks, rolling from the east. They believe that testing the credibility of NATO may only require a handful of drones showing up in the airspace of a member state on the alliance's eastern flank. Would the alliance interpret that as an attack on one of its members? And if so, would others rush to help out? If they didn't, the alliance's deterrence capabilities would likely be a thing of the
Well,
past.
here's an idea. Oh, what's his name? Carl? Hey,
Bruno
Carl,
Karl, yes.
I got an idea for you. Okay. They believe testing the credibility may require a handful of drones showing up in the airspace of a member state. Well, why don't NATO and the Russians say, hey, this could happen. How could we resolve this, not make sure it doesn't turn into an escalation? Can we have some kind of hotline? You
Right.
know, what are these drones here? No, you're misunderstanding it.
Right.
These are weather balloons. What I'm just saying is that they're presenting a potential
Right.
tripwire.
Right.
Well, so why don't you work together to make sure that that tripwire isn't misunderstood? That incident is, I mean, I find it so frustrating is that they're looking for ways for
Yes.
a conflict can happen
That's right.
instead of why don't we
That's
de-escalate, calm everything
right.
down? This
Right.
drone technology has put everything out of whack.
Yes.
All of us, for our mutual safety, have to consider it. You see what I'm saying is that there's no inclination in that direction at all.
No, no, that's right. Um, Also interesting when you read this, what is the Spiegel, and quoting Bruno Karl, but seems to be the Spiegel adopts the same position. What's the plan? Is the plan that if there's a drone flying over NATO territory, then that's it, we go to war? I mean, is that what it is? I mean, that's casus belli, and now we're at war with Russia. I mean, oh, and if so, would others rush to help out? So, I mean, is that what you're planning on? You want to use a drones flying over NATO territory. You want to use that as the opportunity to launch a war against Russia. I mean, it's because that's what seems to. Well, if you don't do that, that NATO deterrence is shot. So if we're not ready to go to war over some drones, that's it. NATO's finished.
So we should just attack Russia.
That's it. That's it. The BND's briefing left an impression on Chancellor Merz on his ministers. left an impression. If Merz had any brains, he'd have said the impression he'd have left. These people are a bunch of loonies. I've got to stop listening to them. Chancellor Merz and his ministers. It was, say sources, one reason why Merz's coalition government with the Social Democrats intends to spend the equivalent of 3.9% of GDP on defense by 2029, earlier than called for by NATO plans. In addition, the conversation with the intelligence analysts has led the government to no longer speak in public of Russian attack capabilities in 2029. Russia is already attacking us, Merz said again this week, this time in an interview with a German public broadcaster. So that's that. And then here's some Defense One. It's another one of these defense publications. If Russia's coming, then we will bring the war to Russia. Inside
NATO's muscular new muscular.
It's
Okay.
muscular, robust. Europe and the United States are more aligned than some headlines suggest, but they have different perceptions of the threat. European officials worry that NATO's ambitious new targets for military capability may not be enough to deter Russia from testing how the alliance will respond to an attack on a member nation within the next 3 to 5 years. Russian President Putin is increasingly perceives Europe weaker than it is, they say, while the White House fails to grasp the severity of the Russian threat. It's kind of interesting that that this stuff is all made up. I mean, there's no evidence for any of this. They say, well, Russia increasingly perceives Europe to be weaker than it is, and you're basing that on what? I mean, did Putin make that speech? Did they say comment like that in any interview? It's just they just make this up to frighten the public about what Putin is thinking.
If there's any testing, it's NATO testing Russia.
Exactly. All of it. Exactly. It's all of it about NATO testing Russia. It's NATO that has provided weapons to be used on Russian territory. On Russian territory. At the NATO summit later this month, members will discuss not only increased defense budgets, but also new operational concepts to respond immediately to a Russian attack, including counterstrikes inside Russia. Estonian foreign minister told.
Yeah, I'm always impressed when they get one of the Baltic republics to talk
It
about
is.
it.
It's actually very, very interesting. It's like
What was it? What was it called? It was the mouse that roared. Was
yes,
it
that's right. But it's
Granduchy of Fenwick? Yeah.
but it's always interesting. It's like if you ever watch CNN, and they always want to find somebody really belligerent. It's always they're interviewing. Who is this person they're interviewing? Oh, he's the foreign minister of Lithuania. And then you say, well, who is this person? Oh, he's the defense minister of Latvia. They always can rely on, who's going to tell us the most belligerent, the most obsessively Russophobic
Yeah,
rant.
and
Always rely on them.
very often the same ministers are also American citizens.
They're always exactly they're American citizens. Um, anyway, so the new concept is that if Russia's coming, then we will bring the war to Russia.
Yay! It said the Estonian.
That's right, exactly. And then we have no time then to discuss whether we can use one of the other weapons or whatever. We have no time. We need to act within the first few minutes and hours.
And we have 4 tanks ready and fueled up, ready to roll. Okay.
That's right. It's very, very interesting. I mean, the mindset of the Baltic states. I mean, it's very odd. I don't fully can't say I fully understand what they're about. Why they're so obsessed. They were able to leave the Soviet Union without a shot being fired. I mean, no one made any effort to keep them in there. It's so this.
Well, and also, in the 3 Baltic republics, there are various percentages of Russians that
Yep.
live there. And it's very frustrating for the political leadership of each republic is that these Russians just want to stay Russian inside their own country.
Right.
Like they have their own internet magazines and stuff like that, and they they congregate, they celebrate Russian holidays,
Right.
and
Right.
they just won't become like us. And because the Russians just say, well, I mean, you're not something we want to emulate.
Right.
Okay. You don't like us,
Right.
number one.
Yes.
You treat us like shit. Okay. But we still have some legal rights because Estonia is a member of the European Union. And so
Right.
we're here, in like a tangent. But I
Right.
mean, it's very frustrating that and this is what happens to small countries because Russia sees itself as a huge civilization, over a long period of time.
Right.
And if you're Latvian and you say, be Latvian or die, and just like
Yes.
I'm Russian, why are you bothering me?
Right.
I'm no threat to you.
Yes. That's right. That's right. That's right.
I mean, it's not like the Poles were saying because they had this Polonizing policy in the 1930s against Ukrainians. You're just Ukrainian. You're village people. You're
Right.
nothing. Okay, a chapter of history that should be revived.
Right.
Okay,
right,
And then the Ukrainians did the same thing to the Poles during the war.
right,
Okay.
right. No, that's right. Um, but again, of course, um, there's not a peep out of the EU over this mistreatment of a national minority. Um, and then so that's just to give you that's just a sample of the most recent stories in which Europe seems marching inexorably to some a
Europe,
military confrontation.
let's be more specific. European elites.
European elites.
Because you
Um,
don't see, I mean,
no, exactly.
I'd like to see evidence if this is true, that the average person in Prague and Bratislava is worried about Russian tanks rolling over
No,
the border. I don't see it,
no,
George.
no, no. You're absolutely right. It's there's the elites, but they're the ones who make the decision. It's very undemocratic when we have Ursula von der Leyen, who acts as if she's the president of the EU, as if she speaks on behalf of the EU, even though nobody has elected her to any kind of a presidential position. And then you have Kaja Kallas, an Estonian. She acts as if she's the foreign minister of the EU, as if she runs EU foreign policy. None of that is true, but they've essentially the Europeans have allowed this to happen rather than at no point have they said, well, you're not actually the president of anything. I mean, your role is to be kind of coordinate. You're supposed to kind of take everybody's views into
Right,
consideration, and then
and I have a cocktail dress ready at all moments.
that's
Okay.
right. That's right. And like Kaya Kallas. I mean, how is she the foreign minister of anything? I mean, it's she always comes in, makes some statement, EU policy on this. She doesn't speak on behalf of the EU, and so that's why yeah, it's the elites, but there's not much. There's no pushback, and precisely along the lines, hey, other than from Viktor Orban and from Robert Fico, who the only ones who seem to be making this point. Hey, you don't speak for us. You don't speak on behalf of Europe, but no one
Well,
else is saying it.
I would be very curious, a reputable polling agency, if you were to ask across the European Union, Europe's elites are calling for rearmament, reconstituting
Right.
national militaries. Um, if that in fact comes to pass, how should those militaries be used? A, against Russia, B, against illegal immigration. I
Yeah.
wonder what the answer would be.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
the second one,
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. This is all a fake. This is exactly fake. But fake and elite projects can come to fruition.
Well,
It doesn't matter that the public isn't with you. You can present the public with a fait accompli. Well, sorry, that's where we are. We're at war now. Tough luck.
so that means your political party is
Right,
gone. Your
right,
access to social media is gone.
right,
Okay. Well, you can be debanked.
right.
Okay. They can
Okay,
do a lot of stuff now because
right,
of our age.
right.
Okay. I mean, you don't agree, then you don't, then your opinion doesn't count because nobody's ever going to hear it.
No, no, exactly. And in fact, again, talking about Merz, in that Bundestag debate, when he said, I will, absolutely continue to provide assistance for Ukraine. I don't care what the left says, and I don't care what the Russian-loving right says. Very interesting that, with the Russian-loving right. And, there you are, preparing the ground for outlawing the far right. And Germany, what is the Russian loving? I mean, if we're at war, we can't have a Russian loving party in the Bundestag.
Yeah. I wonder if Mertz is, thinking about a uniform, maybe. He's at war,
We're at war.
He's at war. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Germany has a rich history
Yes.
of uniforms,
Yep.
okay,
Yep.
and regalia,
Right.
okay.
Right.
Um, I say that with tongue in cheek, obviously, but one thing I would ask our European friends. So Poland, France, Austria, you want to see Merz heading an army, huh? Really? Hmm. Hmm. Kind of
Yes.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
It's the last country in Europe. Yeah, it's been 80 years, everyone. Not long enough. I'm
No.
sorry.
No.
Not long enough.
No.
Nope. 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 Not long enough. All right. And considering Germany's disgusting behavior vis-a-vis what's going on in Palestine. They have no right to say anything about defense and values and whatsoever. It's an abomination what they're doing.
Right.
Okay, it's George. Your point earlier, I think, is really well taken. They don't use the values argument anymore because they can't.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting that it's suddenly gone. I mean, it seems like only yesterday, they were
Only
talking
yesterday, when
values.
Annalena Baerbock was
Yeah,
singing,
the values, and then Stoltenberg would always go on, how NATO, it's an
it's
alliance of
not who
that.
we are. It's not
That-
who we
That's
are.
right. That's all.
Maybe that's not who you are, but I do know who you are.
That's right.
Okay.
So yeah, which itself is interesting. I mean, the German position on Palestine, the Kaya Kallas, who purports to speak for Europe, her position on Palestine, and of course you have the Americans. It's a very interesting that that they're talking about this, all these threats, and about all this horrified by what's going on in Ukraine, but they seem strangely not horrified by anything that goes on in Palestine. It's a
They're not
very
horrified that the United States unilaterally, unprovoked, attacked Iran.
no, no, exactly, exactly.
No, it was interesting.
And
I
in
don't know
fact,
where
they
I saw. I
defended
don't
it.
know
They
where I saw it a
defended it.
couple days ago. They condemned the bombing, but they didn't condemn the United States. They
Correct.
just we cannot have this kind of thing. But they didn't. Again, passive voice. There's
Right.
no predicate in the sentence. Okay,
Right.
Europe is just it's ratioed itself on so many fronts now.
Right.
And George, if the standard of living, if prosperity was going on there, then it really wouldn't matter very much, would it? Okay. But you get none of these things now.
Right.
They're looking for a war that they're not prepared to fight. They want to cut all of the Social Security budgets to pay for all of this. I always have these people say, I think you and I have talked about it before, like how America is becoming like Europe. Europe is becoming like America.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
No social safety net. Okay. Which was the calling card of Europe since the Second World War.
Yeah.
I mean, why do you think people want to go there?
Yeah. Right. No, that's right. And that they somehow think that this will energize the European project. I really don't think that it will, but I think that you have to keep them. I think this is kind of dangerous stuff that they're going down on. Is because they're getting more and more kind of worked up about this, and there's no sign from any of them, any European leader, and now not even from the United States, of how we can bring this to an end, how we can bring this antagonism between the West and Russia to an end, because of course they don't want it to bring it
Yeah.
to an end. It seems to be good business for them, and that's why you read this. Well, he says, "Well, diplomacy, that's it. It's exhausted. No more diplomacy. So, what's the plan?
Okay. Well, and,
You want a war because
and,
that's it,
and what message are you sending to the Kremlin? The negotiations, diplomacy has been exhausted. So how should the Russians react? Oh, they're getting prepared for war.
right?
I'm, these people always act like they're in a echo chamber that
Right.
nobody, what they think among themselves is what's most important.
Right.
I have to say it, George. Wow, we have to prepare for war. Can you imagine how many conferences and meetings and
Right.
buffets? Oh my dear, I have to go. I'm going to Vienna today. Okay,
Right.
we have to talk about tank development
Right.
for the EU for 2035.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Right.
But don't worry, the accommodations are very nice. The digs are very good. I mean, it's such a grift. It's
Right.
such
No, that's right. And I think that's what's so amazing is that they only ever talk among themselves. That's it. And with Zelensky kind of doing it
Hovering,
in
hovering.
one or other of these meetings. So you have on the same day you have Macron and Starmer talking about this wonderful, glorious, great alliance, the Anglo-French alliance, and then meanwhile in Rome, you got they're all meeting on this Ukraine Recovery Act, but it's the same people. It's this constant permutations that they're playing. Even as we speak, I'm sure there's some kind of a conference going on between somebody or other. How we can do more for Ukraine. I mean, it's a constant, but
I'm
that's
sorry.
this it's not it doesn't it's not diplomacy. It's just basically your buddies hanging around together.
Well, in 2025, George, what does Anglo-French
I have no idea.
dialogue mean? What does
Yeah,
that mean today? It meant something in 1914. It meant
yeah.
maybe something even in 1938.
I mean, the one
What does
issue
it mean today?
exactly the one issue which is illegal immigration. They still haven't sorted that out. How the hell are all these illegal migrants crossing the channel? You'd have thought, well, if there was this Anglo-French alliance with such great friends, you wouldn't have this problem of this constant stream of migrants crossing the channel and entering the United Kingdom. But they're not able to solve that. But they do have these big. It's a big state visit. Macron, had a
Yeah,
state
yeah.
visit.
They can't control their borders, but they're getting ready to go to war with Russia.
Exactly. That's right. You can't control your borders, but you really really care about Ukraine's eastern border.
It's a grift. That's all it is. And if it were just left to that, fine, they can waste their own money. But in the attacking those that disagree with them, that's what terrifies me
Right.
the most. Okay.
Right.
Because this is all, I think, look, the European project it's shown itself to be, you know, it hasn't met expectations,
Right.
let's put it that way,
Right.
okay? And what do? You look for a foreign enemy.
Right.
That's what they do,
Right.
okay? And Russia is their favorite one,
Yeah.
okay? It goes Napoleonic Wars, the Crimean, whatever date you want
Right.
to
Right.
pick, it
Right.
doesn't really matter. It's always the same. It's a very convenient
Right.
enemy for them to have,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is just not reciprocated. It's just
No.
so amazing.
No. 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 That's right. Um, and here's this is why this military alliance is so toxic. It just pervades everything,
Well,
destroys
George,
everything,
don't you think the
sucks,
paper
sucks all
you,
the life out of everything. Having this military
yeah,
alliance, which means you're preparing for war. It's constantly preparing for war.
I think, if you're outside of that ecosystem, and if you were just like to pick 100 people from every single country in the world and give them that paper, they would say, this is an argument to shut this organization
Exactly.
down. I think most people would draw
Yep.
that conclusion. I mean,
Yep.
these people are crazy. Why are you looking for trouble?
Right.
Why don't you try to resolve issues? Maybe a little bit of dialogue. I
Right.
mean, I think the Russians, they had their security requirements. They presented it to the West. Did anybody take it seriously? Well, they
Right.
should have.
Right.
Maybe we could have avoided all of this. And I mean that seriously.
Right. Yeah. No, that's right. That's right. And instead, you essentially here you are in the European continent, and again, what are you doing? You're preparing for another continental war. So you had two horrific continental wars in the 20th century, and you seem to want to do it again. I thought we kind of learned your lessons. We're not going to do this again. Well, it looks like you want to do it again. I mean, you created this artificial division on the continent there was no need for. There was that moment in 1991. It seemed like, hey, that's it, end of history. We don't. There's no need for any of these divisions on the European continent. But NATO, it recreated the division and has accentuated it, accentuated it, and had imagine you from some other continent, and you think, why are you doing this? Why are you doing it? Your own continent, European continent. Why do you want to have this war when you've already had two terrible wars not so long ago, and you want to do it again? Again, you're creating
And
these divisions.
and because and I think I was part of that. I think George, you were too. I think we thought at one point lessons had been learned. And and look at the amazing, amazing prosperity that Europe went through in the post-war era. I mean, it's easy, for like maybe basically educated Americans, everybody in France, they eat baguette in the morning and they go to the beach, or, in Italy, everyone is a cheese connoisseur. Europe in the 20th century, there was enormous poverty
Right,
in
right,
Europe
right,
all across the continent,
right, right,
okay?
right.
Europe was an amazingly unfair place. And then in the post-war era, Tony Judt wrote Post-War, a fascinating book. Um, and, the mission was prosperity and peace, prosperity and security. And that was a winning
Right,
proposition.
right. But see, you still had the division. You had the Cold War division, but after the Cold War, like after the Cold War, in 1990, 91,
Yeah. Why
why
couldn't you just
that?
had it continent wide? We we
That's
we
right.
have it works. Let's work. It works.
Right. Yep, and that's it. And now, having accentuated these divisions, you say, "Well, there we are again. You're on the European continent, and you seem to want to have yet another almighty bloodbath." There was no need for this. There was an opportunity, the end of the Cold War, to bring all that to an end. And the Russians, I think, naively, the Gorbachev, others naively believe, yeah, that's it. There's no need for any of these conflicts anymore. It was, the Bolsheviks have gone, communism gone. That was it. That was what you objected to, and so we can all, live together happily. Yeah. That was totally naive. And then here we are again. Again you have these divisions, and once again you're getting ready for a war.
Because of messianic tendencies that they
Right,
cannot reckon with,
right.
and hegemony. George used a better word, not hegemony. He used looting, and
Yes,
that's what it is.
yeah, that's right.
It's to loot.
That's right.
All right, everyone. Unfortunately, who I call Dirty Fred Merz. Gonna have to keep an eye on this guy. He's the most dangerous man,
Yes,
most
yes,
dangerous man in Europe, and he's a German.
yes, yes, yes. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And George, this guy, he disappeared from politics 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. He was too ghastly for the Christian Democrats. They chose this unknown Angela Merkel. They preferred Angela Merkel to lead the CDU to him. He was already a political heavyweight there 20 years ago, and they decided, no, I don't think so. We prefer Frau Merkel, and he came back, and then you realize, well, you avoided that mistake 20 years ago by not going with him. Now you've got it. And he's every bit as bad as you knew he would be. And now you've got this awful figure. It's going to be there for a while. We're not going to get rid of him for some time. And so yeah,
when you had Sergeant Schultz, I mean, he was a bungling,
right,
buffoonish character, but he
right.
wasn't dangerous.
No, no, no. And he had a certain caution. I mean, for all that, he kind of, I don't think it's a great idea to get too um, belligerent with Russia. It's
Let's
not a
have a
great idea.
couple of rounds of schnapps and let's
Yeah,
think about it, okay?
that's right. That's right.
No, and Merz is not that way. He's already decided he's a war chancellor.
Right.
And the last time we had a war chancellor, it didn't work out well, everyone.
Right.
All righty. We're laser focused on this guy.
Laser. That's right.
Okay.
Laser
Okay.
focus.
Who would have thought that, they took Borrell away from us, Annalena Baerbock, they took away from us, Sergeant Schultz. Um, what was her name? The shortest serving prime minister
Oh,
in prison.
Liz Truss,
Liz Truss. Oh,
who's
God bless her.
reinvented
God bless
herself
her
as
soul.
she's
God
the
bless her.
populace. This totally unpopulist, the very antithesis of populism. Suddenly, well, I'm a populist. I'm against the deep state.
And she's still trying to, she's at
Yeah.
China now, right?
She's she's trying to revive her political career as a populist, as a kind of the kind of a British Trumpian. Um, so, but she was the opposite. Everything about her, she had utter contempt for the public, and totally arrogant. But because it was, she ended so disastrously, she decided, well, I think I'm going to show myself to be a populist, a kind of Trumpian populist. I was sabotaged by the deep state. They were out to get me,
No,
because
you were an idiot.
exactly
You were completely unprepared
right.
for your job. You were swiftly moved to the highest echelons of the party for
Yeah,
no good reason.
no,
Just say it, everyone,
yeah,
okay?
yeah,
That's what
exactly.
happens when you do
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
that's right.
All right, before we're accused of misogyny, this is the Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Locals, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. This is the end of our Friday wrap. We reconvene on Sunday and live stream at 10 o'clock Eastern Time on Monday. And then
Exactly.
George is going freestyle on Tuesday.
Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Please join us for all of that. And then think about the dogs who are expressing their disquiet. They're the sort of, there's a deep state. They think, yeah, there's a deep state plotting against us. We do all this work, but the deep state doesn't acknowledge all of our labors.
Because
So
there's deep Chihuahua, and be careful.
that's right. So anything you've got, you got to, go into your bank account, draw everything out, put it into the tip jar, any gold coins that are lying around, not doing anything useful, into the tip jar. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology. And above all, we can get the dogs off this whole deep state thing. They're getting quite preoccupied with it. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.